He had everything money could buy, until a poor man's heart taught him the true meaning of life. Before we begin, drop a comment below with the city you're watching from. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this emotional story. He had $47 billion, 3 ex-wives, and 6 months to live. The only thing that could save him was something money couldn't buy. Marcus Hale was in the middle of closing the biggest merger in tech history when his heart stopped. One moment, he was standing at the head of his penthouse boardroom, commanding a room full of executives with the same cold precision that had built his empire. The next moment, he was on the floor, gasping, clutching his chest as 52 years of neglect, stress, and ambition caught up with him in a single, catastrophic beat. His assistant Jennifer's scream cut through the chaos. Someone called 911. Papers scattered across Italian marble floors worth more per square foot than most people's homes. And Marcus Hale, the man who controlled a tech empire spanning 3 continents, couldn't control his own body. At the hospital, the doctor's words were clinical and final. Advanced cardiomyopathy, heart failure, 6 months, maybe less, without a transplant. Marcus sat alone in that sterile room, staring at his phone. The screen lit up with notifications. Business partners, board members, his lawyer, hundreds of contacts, thousands of connections. But not a single person he could call who would care if he lived or died. Not really. This was Marcus Hale at 52. Silver hair that cost $300 to cut. Suits tailored in Milan. Cold gray eyes that had never learned how to smile, only calculate. He'd built Hale Industries from nothing, from a tiny startup in his garage to a $47 billion empire. But somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten to build a life. 3 marriages had crumbled under the weight of 18-hour workdays and a heart that only beat for profit margins. His daughter Emma hadn't spoken to him in 5 years, not since he missed her college graduation for a meeting in Singapore that could have waited. His $40 million penthouse in Manhattan had 12 rooms, and he ate dinner alone in every single one of them. But 50 blocks away, in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Queens, a very different kind of wealth was being counted. David Chen was 38 years old, and he was running late. His shift as night janitor at Hale Industries headquarters didn't start until 11, but he'd promised his 8-year-old daughter Lily he'd be home for dinner, and David Chen never broke promises to his little girl. He burst through the apartment door, still in his maintenance uniform from his day job, warm brown eyes crinkling with that gentle smile everyone who knew him loved. "Daddy!" Lily launched herself at him, nearly knocking him over, her small hands clutching drawings she'd made at school. Let me see," David laughed, kneeling down to her level, giving each crayon masterpiece the serious attention it deserved. His wife Sarah watched from the kitchen doorway, her own smile soft and full, as David made their daughter feel like the most important artist in the world. They ate spaghetti that night, not expensive pasta from some fancy restaurant, but Sarah's homemade recipe, the one that filled their small apartment with warmth and the smell of garlic and love. Lily chattered about her day, about her best friend Emma, about the new book she was reading. David listened to every word like it was the most fascinating story he'd ever heard. Sarah's hand found his across the table, squeezed gently, and in that moment, in that cramped apartment with the leaky faucet they couldn't afford to fix yet, David Chen was the richest man in the world. He worked 2 jobs to keep it that way. Day shift at a warehouse, night shift cleaning the gleaming offices of Hale Industries. Every Saturday, despite exhaustion that sank into his bones, he volunteered at the community center, teaching kids to read. People loved David Chen, not because of what he had, but because of who he was. Kind, present, a man who noticed people, who made them feel seen. Meanwhile, 50 blocks north, Marcus Hale sat in his penthouse, picking at a $200 dinner prepared by his private chef. Tasted like nothing. Everything tasted like nothing lately. His phone rang. Another business partner. He let it go to voicemail. For the first time in his life, Marcus Hale didn't want to talk about profit margins or market shares or quarterly reports. For the first time in his life, Marcus Hale was afraid. The transplant list didn't care about his money. That was the bitter irony that kept him awake at night. He'd spent 5 decades believing everything had a price, that every problem could be solved with enough zeros on a check. But you can't buy your way up an organ donation list. He was patient number 7,439, and his billions couldn't change that number by even one digit. Everything has a price, he'd snarled at his doctor during their last appointment. Everything. The doctor had looked at him with something that might have been pity. Not this, Mr. Hale. This requires something money can't buy. It requires someone else's generosity, someone's sacrifice. Marcus had left that appointment shaken in a way no business deal ever had. He pulled up Emma's Facebook page that night, something he did more often than he'd ever admit. There she was, 28 years old now, beautiful and successful and happy in a life he'd never been part of. Wedding photos from last year. He hadn't been invited. Career achievements at the law firm where she worked. He'd found out from LinkedIn. A life blossoming without him, and whose fault was that? He almost called her. His finger hovered over her number for a full minute. But what would he say? I'm dying, so now I care? He closed the phone, the moment passing like so many others before it. 6 months to live, maybe less. And Marcus Hale, who had everything money could buy, realized he had nothing that mattered at all. If this story is touching your heart, please subscribe to Rich Tide's channel. We bring you powerful stories that remind us what truly matters in life. But here's a question for you. If you had 6 months to live, who would you call? Really think about it. Would you have someone? Let us know in the comments below, because sometimes the answer to that question tells us everything we need to know about the life we're living. 3 months crawled by like wounded animals, each day stealing a little more of Marcus Hale's strength, a little more of his breath, a little more of his illusion of control. He'd always been invincible. That's what 52 years of winning had taught him. But now, sitting in his penthouse office, he could barely make it through a video conference call without his chest tightening, without that suffocating weight pressing down on him like the world itself was trying to crush him into nothing. His doctors had been clear. His heart was failing faster than they'd anticipated. The transplant list hadn't moved. He was still number 7,439, watching his empire from the sidelines while his body betrayed him one beat at a time. The cruelest revelation came slowly, then all at once. Hale Industries didn't need him. The machine he'd built kept running without him at the controls. Board meetings happened without his presence. Deals closed without his signature. The quarterly earnings report came in strong, maybe stronger than when he'd been steering the ship with an iron fist. Marcus Hale, the man who thought he was irreplaceable, discovered he was just another cog that could be swapped out when it stopped working. Jennifer found him staring out the window one gray afternoon, his reflection ghostly in the glass. She'd been his assistant for 15 years, had seen him through 2 divorces, countless victories, the building of an empire. She brought him tea he wouldn't drink and sat down without being invited. Marcus, she said gently, using his first name in a way she rarely did. Can we talk? Not about work. About you. About how you're really doing. He didn't turn from the window. Just keep the board updated on my condition. That's all that matters. That's not all that matters, Jennifer pressed, her voice cracking slightly. You matter. Your life matters. Have you talked to anyone? Have you reached out to? I said keep the board updated. His tone was ice, the same voice that had ended careers and crushed competitors. That will be all. Jennifer left without another word. He heard her quiet footsteps fade down the hallway, heard the elevator doors close, and felt the penthouse settle back into its familiar, suffocating silence. That night, like so many nights before, Marcus found himself scrolling through Emma's Facebook page. It had become a ritual of self-torture. There she was at a charity gala, stunning in an emerald dress, accepting some award for her pro bono legal work. There she was hiking with friends, laughing at something outside the frame. There she was at her wedding last year, radiant and beautiful, and he hadn't even known about it until he saw these photos. Her new last name stared back at him from the screen like an accusation. He'd missed everything, every milestone, every achievement, every moment that made up his daughter's life. His finger hovered over the call button. 28 years old now, a successful lawyer, married, living a full life without him. His thumb trembled over her number. What would he even say? "I'm sorry" seemed too small for the ocean of regret drowning him. "I'm dying" felt like manipulation. "I love you" felt like a lie after 5 years of silence. He closed the phone. Again, like he always did. 50 blocks away, David Chen was living the last normal night of his life, though he didn't know it yet. The Hale Industries tower gleamed under fluorescent lights as David pushed his cleaning cart through the executive floor. The other janitors were gathered by the elevators on their break, voices low in gossip the way working people do when they think no one important is listening. "Did you hear about the big boss?" Carlos, one of the day shift guys, was saying. "Heart failure. Might not make it. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy," someone else muttered sarcastically. "Man hasn't said 2 words to any of us in 20 years. David paused in his work, his gentle face thoughtful. "I'll pray for him," he said quietly. "Everyone deserves compassion, especially when they're suffering." Carlos laughed, not unkindly. "David, man, you're too good. That guy wouldn't notice if you disappeared tomorrow. Probably doesn't even know your name." David smiled, that warm smile of his, the one that made everyone around him feel a little bit better about the world. "That's okay. God notices, and that's enough for me." He finished his shift at 2 in the morning, bone-tired but content. The drive home was quiet, the city streets empty except for the occasional taxi. David's mind was already on tomorrow, on Lily's upcoming 9th birthday next week. She'd been talking about it for months. Sarah was planning a small party, just a few friends from school. They couldn't afford anything fancy, but Lily wouldn't care. She just wanted her favorite chocolate chip cookies, the ones from that little bakery on Main Street. David smiled to himself and made a decision. He'd stop at the 24-hour store, pick up some of those cookies now, surprise her at breakfast. That was the kind of thing that made Lily's whole face light up, the kind of moment David lived for. He pulled into the store parking lot at 2:47 a.m. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The parking lot was mostly empty except for a few scattered cars, and David's eyes caught movement near the side of the building. An elderly woman, maybe 70, clutching her purse. A man, drunk by the way he swayed, getting aggressive, grabbing at her bag, his voice loud and slurred and angry. David didn't think. He never did when someone needed help. He was out of his car before his brain caught up with his heart, jogging across the parking lot, his voice calm but firm. "Hey, leave her alone. Let's all just calm down here." The drunk man spun around, eyes wild and unfocused. "Mind your own business." "Can't do that, friend," David said, positioning himself between the man and the terrified woman. "Why don't you let the lady go? I'll even call you a cab, get you home safe." For a moment, it seemed like it might work. The drunk man hesitated, swayed, looked confused. The elderly woman clutched David's arm, trembling. Then everything happened too fast. The man's hand went to his jacket. Metal flashed under the parking lot lights. David saw the knife and made his choice in a heartbeat. He pushed the elderly woman behind him, held up his hands in a gesture of peace. Okay. No one needs to get hurt here. Just." The man lunged. The knife caught David in the abdomen. A sharp, burning shock that stole his breath. He stumbled backward, hand going to his stomach, feeling warmth spread across his uniform. The drunk man, realizing what he'd done, ran, disappearing into the night like a coward. David collapsed to the pavement. The elderly woman screamed, fumbled for her phone, called 911 with shaking hands. She dropped to her knees beside him, pressing her scarf to his wound, crying, apologizing, thanking him. David barely heard her. His vision was tunneling, getting dark at the edges. His last clear thought, as consciousness slipped away like water through his fingers, was of his family. "Sarah, Lily, I love you. I love you both so much." 2 hours later, Sarah Chen burst through the emergency room doors with Lily clutching her hand, both of them still in their pajamas, terror written across their faces. A nurse had called. Accident. Critical condition. Come now. The doctor met them in a sterile white hallway that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. His face told Sarah everything before his words did. Mrs. Chen, I'm so sorry. Your husband sustained severe trauma. We did everything we could, but the damage to his brain was catastrophic. There's no brain activity. He's being kept alive by machines. Sarah's legs gave out. She would have fallen if the nurse hadn't caught her. Lily was crying, clutching her mother, not fully understanding but understanding enough. The world tilted on its axis, and everything good and bright and beautiful in Sarah Chen's life shattered into a million pieces. Through her tears, through the grief that felt like drowning, Sarah remembered something. David's wallet. The little card he'd signed years ago, the one he'd shown her with that gentle smile of his. He always said, Sarah whispered, voice breaking on every word, if anything happened to him, he wanted to help someone live. He's an organ donor. He'd want his death to mean something. The doctor nodded gently, gave her time, gave her space to say goodbye to the man who had been her whole world. In a different hospital across the city, Marcus Hale was drifting in and out of a restless sleep when his door burst open. His doctor, usually so calm and clinical, looked almost excited. Mr. Hale, we have a match. A heart. Surgery is scheduled for 2 hours from now. Marcus sat up too quickly, world spinning. A match? Who's the donor? The doctor shook his head. Anonymous per protocol. All we know is that the family gave consent tonight. Someone chose to save your life, Mr. Hale. Marcus nodded slowly, not asking more questions because he didn't know how to process the strange feeling unfurling in his chest. Somewhere out there, someone had died, and their death was giving him a second chance at life. He didn't know yet that 50 blocks away, David Chen's heart was beating its last beats in the body it had called home for 38 years. He didn't know that a hero had died so a stranger could live. He didn't know that the janitor he'd walked past 1,000 times without seeing was about to become the most important person in his life. But soon he would know everything, and nothing would ever be the same. 3 weeks after the surgery, Marcus Hale was alive. The doctors called it a miracle. Perfect match, flawless procedure, recovery progressing ahead of schedule. His body was accepting the new heart like it had always been there, beating strong and steady in his chest. Physically, Marcus Hale was healing better than anyone had dared hope. But something was wrong, or maybe something was finally right. Marcus couldn't tell the difference anymore. Started small. Strange little moments he tried to dismiss as side effects of the medication. He was watching television in his hospital room one afternoon, mindlessly flipping channels, when he landed on some children's cartoon. Bright colors, simple story, a father penguin teaching his baby to swim. And suddenly, without warning, tears were streaming down his face. Marcus Hale, who had fired 300 employees without blinking, who had buried his own father with dry eyes, who hadn't cried since he was 7 years old, was sobbing over a cartoon penguin. He wiped his face quickly, looked around to make sure no nurse had seen, felt his heart, the new heart, the stranger's heart, hammering in his chest like it was trying to tell him something. The food was next. The hospital nutritionist came by with the special meal plan his personal chef had sent over. Grilled sea bass, quinoa, organic vegetables prepared precisely how Marcus always liked them. He took one bite and pushed the tray away. Can I get spaghetti instead? He heard himself asking. Just regular spaghetti, with garlic bread. The nutritionist blinked in surprise. Mr. Hale, that's not on your cardiac recovery diet. I don't care. I need spaghetti. He couldn't explain why. He'd never particularly liked spaghetti before, but now the craving was overwhelming, like a memory his body had but his mind didn't. Jennifer noticed the changes immediately. She'd known Marcus for 15 years, had memorized every inflection of his voice, every micro-expression on his face. When she visited that Thursday afternoon, she sat down in the chair beside his bed and just stared at him. What? Marcus asked, suddenly self-conscious under her gaze. You seem different. Jennifer said slowly, carefully, like she was afraid the words might break something. You look at people now. Really look at them. You thanked the nurse by name earlier. You smiled at the janitor in the hallway. I've always been polite, Marcus said defensively. No, Jennifer said softly. You haven't, but you are now. What changed, Marcus? He wanted to dismiss it, to tell her she was imagining things, that he was the same man he'd always been. But he couldn't, because he felt it too, this strange shifting inside him, like someone was rearranging his soul without asking permission. I don't know, he admitted quietly, but something did. The obsession began that night. Marcus lay awake in his hospital bed, hand pressed against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his new heart. Someone's heart. Someone who had lived and loved and died so that Marcus could have a second chance. Who were you? The question burned through him like fever. Who died so I could live? He knew the rules. Donor identities were kept confidential, protected by privacy laws and ethical protocols. But Marcus Hale had spent 52 years finding ways around rules that weren't convenient for him. By morning, he'd made 3 phone calls. By afternoon, he'd hired the best private investigator money could buy. I need to know whose heart is beating in my chest, Marcus told the investigator over an encrypted line. I don't care what it costs. I don't care what laws you have to bend. Find out who saved my life. The investigator didn't ask questions. Men like Marcus Hale paid too well for questions. 2 weeks later, Marcus was back in his penthouse, still weak but mobile, when the envelope arrived. Plain manila folder, no return address, left with his doorman. His hands shook as he carried it to his desk. For a long moment, he just stared at it. Once he opened this, there was no going back. Whatever he learned would change everything. He knew that with the same certainty he knew his own name. Marcus opened the folder. Photographs spilled across his desk like an avalanche. A man's face stared up at him from a dozen different angles. Warm brown eyes. A gentle smile that reached all the way to those eyes and seemed to light up everything around him. Maintenance uniform, family photos, a wife and a little girl with dark hair and that same beautiful smile. And then Marcus saw it. The Hale Industries logo on the uniform shirt. The familiar hallways of his building in the background of one photo. Recognition hit him like lightning, like a punch to the gut, like the ground opening up beneath his feet. The janitor. His janitor. The man he'd walked past hundreds, maybe thousands of times without ever actually seeing. Without ever wondering if he had a name, a family, a life that mattered. Marcus's hands trembled as he read the full report. David Chen, age 38, night janitor at Hale Industries for 7 years. Also worked day shifts at a warehouse to support his family. Wife Sarah, daughter Lily, age 8. Volunteered every Saturday at the community center teaching kids to read. Died heroically intervening in an assault. Saved an elderly woman's life. Organ donor. Beloved by everyone who knew him. The photos kept staring up at Marcus. David in his uniform, mopping the floors Marcus had walked across without a second thought. David with his arm around his wife, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. David kneeling beside his daughter, helping her with homework at their small kitchen table. A man who worked 2 jobs and still found time to volunteer. A man who died saving a stranger. A man who'd made the choice years ago to be an organ donor because he wanted his death to mean something, to help someone live. And Marcus had never even known his name. Something broke inside Marcus Hale in that moment. Something that had been frozen solid for 52 years suddenly cracked wide open, and everything came pouring out. He collapsed into his chair, the photos clutched in his hands, and cried. Really cried, the kind of deep, wrenching sobs that come from the very core of your being. These weren't the delicate tears from the cartoon. These were the tears of a man facing the truth about his own life and finding it wanting. These were the tears of a man who'd been given everything and realized he'd earned nothing that mattered. A hero died so I could live, Marcus whispered to the empty penthouse, voice breaking on every word. A man worth more than me. A man who actually made the world better just by being in it. And I never even saw him. He pressed both hands against his chest, felt David Chen's heart beating steady and strong, and the weight of it. Not the physical weight, but the moral weight, the responsibility, the debt, crushed him. "What am I supposed to do with this?" he asked the silence. "How do I live worthy of your gift?" The photos stared back at him, offering no answers. Just a man's face, a man's smile, a man's life lived with purpose and love. Everything Marcus had never been. He found David's home address in the report. A modest apartment in Queens, the same building David had lived in for 10 years. Sarah and Lily still lived there, still grieving, still trying to piece their lives back together after losing the man who'd been their whole world. Marcus stared at that address for hours, wrestled with himself, with his fear, with the crushing weight of inadequacy. What right did he have to show up at their door? What could he possibly say that wouldn't sound hollow or selfish? Jennifer found him like that the next morning, still at his desk, still staring at the photos, looking like he hadn't slept at all. "Marcus," she said gently, taking in the scene, the photographs, the haunted look in his eyes. "What will you say to them?" "I don't know," Marcus admitted, his voice raw and honest in a way it had never been before. "I don't know what words exist for this. How do you thank someone's family for their sacrifice? How do you tell a widow and a little girl that you're alive because their husband, their father, was better than you'll ever be?" Jennifer sat down across from him, saw the real pain in his face, the genuine transformation happening in real time. "Maybe you don't have to have the right words. Maybe you just have to be honest." Marcus looked down at the photo of David with his daughter, both of them laughing, both of them whole and happy in a moment that would never come again. He pressed his hand against his chest one more time, felt that steady, faithful heartbeat. David Chen's heartbeat. "I have to try," Marcus said finally, standing up on legs that felt unsteady. "I have to at least try. I owe him that much. I owe them that much." He didn't know what he would say when he knocked on that door. He didn't know if they'd even let him in, if they'd want anything to do with the man who was living because their beloved David was dead. But for the first time in 52 years, Marcus Hale was about to do something that wasn't calculated, wasn't strategic, wasn't about profit or winning or control. For the first time in his life, Marcus Hale was about to do something simply because it was right. Marcus Hale stood outside a modest apartment building in Queens for 10 full minutes before he could make himself move. His driver had offered to wait, but Marcus had sent him away. This wasn't something you arrived at in a town car worth more than most people's houses. This wasn't a business meeting. This was something else entirely, something Marcus had no experience with, no script for, no strategy to fall back on. His hand was raised to knock 3 separate times before he pulled it back, heart pounding. David's heart pounding against his ribs. What was he doing here? What right did he have to disturb this family's grief with his presence, with the walking reminder that their beloved was gone? But he thought of David's words on the organ donor card about making a second chance count, and he finally knocked. The woman who opened the door was younger than Marcus expected, maybe early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and eyes that were still red-rimmed from crying. 2 months since David's death, the report had said, but grief didn't follow timelines. Marcus could see it in every line of her face, in the way she held herself together like she might fall apart if she let go even a little. She looked at him with polite confusion, not recognizing the face that had been on the cover of Forbes magazine a dozen times. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice hoarse from crying or exhaustion or both. Marcus's carefully prepared words evaporated. His throat closed up. He stood there like an idiot, this man who'd commanded boardrooms full of the world's most powerful people, unable to form a single coherent sentence. "Mrs. Chen," he finally managed, voice shaking. "My name is Marcus Hale. I received your husband's heart." Sarah Chen's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes went wide, filled instantly with tears, and for a horrible moment Marcus thought she might slam the door in his face. He wouldn't have blamed her. Instead, she stepped back, hands still pressed to her mouth, and gestured him inside with the other. Marcus entered David Chen's world and felt his own shrink to nothing in comparison. The apartment was small, maybe a third the size of Marcus's bedroom, but it was full in a way his penthouse had never been. Family photos covered every available surface. David and Sarah on their wedding day, both of them young and radiant. David holding a newborn Lily, his face transformed with wonder. Birthday parties, holidays, ordinary moments made extraordinary by love. Lily's drawings covered the refrigerator, held up by mismatched magnets. A child's backpack hung by the door. A worn couch that had clearly been sat on, lived on, loved on for years. This was a home. Marcus's $40 million penthouse was just a place where he slept. Sarah moved through the small kitchen on autopilot, putting on water for tea, her hands trembling slightly. "David's favorite," she said quietly, pulling out a box of Earl Grey. "He'd drink 3 cups a day. I keep buying it even though." Her voice broke. "I keep forgetting he's not coming home." Marcus stood in the middle of the living room, afraid to sit, afraid to touch anything, afraid he'd contaminate this sacred space with his presence. Everywhere he looked, he saw David. The man's life, his love, his legacy, all contained in this modest apartment that cost less per month than Marcus spent on ties. A door opened down the hallway, small footsteps, and then Lily Chen appeared, 8 years old with her father's warm brown eyes and her mother's delicate features. She stopped when she saw Marcus, curious but not afraid. "Mama, who's this?" Sarah set down the kettle, wiped her eyes quickly, crouched down to her daughter's level. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks as she said, voice breaking on every word, "This is the man Daddy saved, sweetheart." Lily's eyes went wide. She looked at Marcus with an intensity that made him want to shrink, to disappear, to be anywhere but under the gaze of this child whose father had died so he could live. Sarah gestured for Marcus to sit, and he did, perching on the edge of the worn couch while Sarah and Lily sat across from him. The tea sat forgotten on the coffee table between them. "Tell me about him," Marcus said, voice rough. "Please, I need to know who he was." And Sarah did. The words poured out of her like water from a broken dam. 2 months of grief and love and memories she'd been holding inside with no one to share them with who would truly understand. She told him how David worked 2 jobs, 16 hours most days, but never complained. How he'd come home exhausted and still have energy to play with Lily, to help with her homework, to make them both feel like the most important people in the world. How he volunteered every Saturday at the community center because he believed everyone deserved someone who cared, someone who noticed them. "He'd see people," Sarah said, eyes distant with memory. "Really see them. The checkout clerk at the grocery store, the security guard at his building, the homeless man on the corner. He knew all their names. He made everyone feel valued, like they mattered. I walked past him 1,000 times," Marcus confessed, the shame of it burning through him. "In my building. He cleaned my offices, and I never even saw him, never knew his name, never wondered if he had a family, a life, dreams." Sarah looked at him with those red-rimmed eyes and said something that broke Marcus in a new way. "David wouldn't hold that against you. He believed everyone deserves grace, even people who don't see us. Maybe especially them." Marcus couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. This woman, who had every right to hate him, to blame him, to curse the fact that her husband had died so a stranger could live, was offering him grace. Sarah stood up, disappeared into the bedroom for a moment, and returned with something small in her hands. David's organ donor card, worn at the edges, obviously carried in his wallet for years. "I have something for you," she said, holding it out. Marcus took it with shaking hands. The front was standard, official, checking all the boxes for organ donation. But Sarah turned it over, and Marcus saw the handwriting on the back. David's handwriting, written years ago in blue ink that had faded but was still legible. "To whoever receives my gifts, live fully, love deeply. You have a second chance. Make it count." Marcus read those words once, twice, 3 times. His vision blurred with tears. His hands shook so badly he nearly dropped the card. David had written this years ago, never knowing who might read it, never knowing it would be the man who'd walked past him without seeing him for 7 years. "He really believed that," Sarah whispered. "That life was precious. that every day was a gift. Lily had been quiet through all of this, watching Marcus with those solemn eyes. But now she stood up, moved closer, her small face uncertain but determined. "Mister," she said in a voice barely above a whisper, Can I hear my daddy's heart?" Marcus looked at Sarah, who nodded through her tears. He looked at this little girl who had lost her hero, her whole world, and he couldn't speak, could only nod and gesture to his chest. Lily climbed up onto the couch beside him, so small and fragile, and carefully pressed her ear against Marcus's chest, against her father's heart. The room went silent except for that steady, faithful rhythm. Thump thump, thump thump, the sound of David Chen, still present, still beating, still alive in a way that transcended death. "It sounds just like him," Lily whispered, voice full of wonder and grief and something like peace. "It's really him." And Marcus broke completely. He wrapped his arms around this child he didn't know, this child whose father's heart was beating in his chest, and he cried like he'd never cried in his entire life. Great, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere so deep he didn't know he had depth like that. Sarah was crying too, and Lily was crying, and they sat there together in that small apartment. Three people bound together by loss and love and an impossible gift. When Marcus could finally speak again, when the tears had subsided enough for words to form, he looked at Sarah with something like desperation. "Your husband gave me life," he said, voice raw and honest. "I want to honor that. Please let me help you. Let me do something. Money, anything you need." But Sarah was already shaking her head. "We don't need money, Mr. Hale. David never cared about that. He cared about things money can't buy." "Then tell me," Marcus pressed, leaning forward, needing to understand. "Tell me what David cared about. Tell me how to live worthy of this gift." Sarah looked at him for a long moment, at this billionaire sitting in her modest apartment with her daughter still nestled against his side, listening to her father's heart. She smiled through her tears, sad but genuine. "People," she said simply. "David cared about people. He believed the measure of a life wasn't what you accumulated but who you helped, who you loved, who you made feel seen and valued. He believed everyone had worth, regardless of what they could give back." Marcus closed his eyes, felt David's heart beating steady in his chest, felt the weight of those words settle over him like a mantle. "Then that's what I'll do," he said, opening his eyes and meeting Sarah's gaze with a clarity he'd never felt before. "I'll care about people. I'll see them. I'll make this second chance count for something. I promise you. I promise David. I promise Lily." He looked down at the little girl still curled against him, her small hand resting over his heart, her father's heart. "I promise," he whispered again. And in that moment, in that small apartment in Queens, Marcus Hale finally understood what it meant to be wealthy. 6 months later, Marcus Hale was sitting cross-legged on the floor of the Riverside Community Center, surrounded by 7 children between the ages of 5 and 9, reading Where the Wild Things Are in different voices for each character. Every Saturday, same time, same place, the exact spot where David Chen had volunteered for years, doing the exact same thing Marcus was doing now. Reading to kids who needed someone to care, someone to notice them, someone to make them feel like they mattered. Marcus wasn't wearing a suit. No $5,000 Italian tailoring, no silk tie, no polished leather shoes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Just jeans and a casual button-down shirt, clothes that could handle sticky fingers and accidental spills, and children climbing all over him like he was a human jungle gym. And they did climb on him. Little hands tugged at his sleeves, small bodies pressed against his sides. Eager faces looked up at him with trust and affection. Marcus knew every single one of their names, knew their favorite books, their struggles in school, their dreams for the future. He saw them, really saw them, the way David had seen people. Mr. Marcus, read it again," 7-year-old Sophia begged, bouncing on her knees. "Yeah, do the monster voice again," added Jamal, grinning with 2 missing front teeth. Marcus laughed, a sound that came easier now, more natural. "One more time," he agreed. "But then you all have to promise to help clean up." They promised. They always did. And Marcus read the story again, losing himself in the simple joy of making children smile. The boardroom at Hale Industries had never been quieter. Marcus stood at the head of the table, facing the same executives who'd watched him collapse 9 months earlier, and announced changes that sent shockwaves through the entire company. Living wage for all employees, including the janitorial staff. Full healthcare coverage, not just for workers but for their families. College scholarship programs for workers' children. Paid family leave. Mental health resources. We're also establishing the David Chen Memorial Fund, Marcus continued, his voice steady but weighted with emotion. Named after a man who worked in this building for 7 years, who we all walked past without seeing. The fund will support families in need and provide resources for community programs. Because profit margins aren't the only measure of success. People are. The board members sat in stunned silence. CFO Richard Morrison finally spoke up, voice careful. Marcus, these changes will cost millions. Billions, Marcus corrected. Over time, yes, and we can afford it. We've been hoarding wealth while the people who make this company run can barely afford rent. That ends now. Jennifer, sitting to his right, was crying quietly. The employees who heard about it later, the janitors, the mailroom workers, the cafeteria staff, couldn't believe it. Some thought it was a joke. But it wasn't. Marcus Hale had changed, and he was changing everything around him. 3 weeks after that board meeting, Marcus sat in a coffee shop in Brooklyn, hands wrapped around a cup he was too nervous to drink from, waiting for someone he hadn't seen in 5 years. When Emma walked in, Marcus's breath caught. She looked so much like her mother. So grown up, so beautiful, so much a stranger because he'd chosen to be absent from her life. She spotted him, hesitated, and for a terrible moment Marcus thought she might leave. But she didn't. She walked to his table and sat down across from him, guarded but present. "Hi, Dad." 2 words, just 2 words, but they hit Marcus like a tidal wave. "Emma," he managed, voice thick. "Thank you for coming. I'm sorry I wasn't there. For your graduation, for your wedding, for everything. I'm trying to be better." Emma studied him for a long moment, those intelligent eyes that had inherited his sharpness but not his coldness. "What changed?" she asked quietly. "Why now?" Marcus could have lied, could have deflected, but he'd promised to live differently, to be honest, to care about people more than his pride. "Someone reminded me what really matters," he said simply. "Someone who gave me a second chance. And I don't want to waste it." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I've been so angry at you for so long. You have every right to be. But I've also missed you," she whispered. "I've missed my dad." They talked for 3 hours. Not about business or money or the past hurts, though those came up too, but about the present, about possibilities, about the slow, careful work of rebuilding something that had been broken for too long. When they finally left that coffee shop, they didn't hug. Not yet, that would come later. But Emma squeezed his hand before she walked away. "Small steps," she said. "Small steps," Marcus agreed, hope blooming in his chest for the first time in years. 1 year after the transplant, Marcus stood in front of a simple gravestone in a quiet cemetery, with Sarah and Lily on either side of him. David Chen, beloved husband, father, and friend, a hero who lived fully and loved deeply. Marcus knelt down, placed fresh flowers against the stone, and sat on the grass the way he'd seen other people do at graves, the way he'd never done at his own father's funeral because he'd been too busy, too important, too closed off to feel anything at all. "Thank you, David," Marcus said quietly, hand pressed against his chest, feeling that steady, faithful heartbeat. "Every day, I try to live worthy of your gift. I read to the kids at the community center. I've made changes at the company. I'm rebuilding things with Emma. I'm trying to see people the way you did. I hope I'm getting it right." Lily, 9 years old now and growing more like her father every day, reached over and held Marcus's hand. "Daddy would be proud of you, Mr. Marcus," she said with the certainty only children have. Marcus looked at her. This beautiful child who'd forgiven him for being alive when her father wasn't, who'd made room in her broken heart for the stranger carrying her father's most precious gift. "Call me Marcus," he said softly. "And I hope so. I really hope so." They sat there together for a while, three people bound by loss and love and a gift that transcended explanation. When they finally left, Marcus felt something he'd never felt before. Not the illusion of control or the emptiness of success, but something genuine and true. He felt peace. That evening, Marcus returned to his penthouse, but it looked nothing like it had a year ago. Family photos now covered his desk. Emma at her law firm, smiling at the camera. Sarah and Lily at Lily's birthday party last month, which Marcus had attended and helped organize. Jennifer and her family at the company holiday party, where Marcus had actually stayed for the whole event instead of leaving after 20 minutes. Children's drawings covered his refrigerator, held up by magnets. Art from the community center kids. From Lily, colorful and messy and absolutely perfect. And on the stove, a pot of spaghetti was simmering. David's family recipe, the one Sarah had taught Marcus how to make. The one that had become his favorite meal not because it was expensive or exclusive, but because it reminded him of what mattered. Jennifer stopped by with some papers for him to sign, but she paused when she saw him standing in his kitchen, stirring pasta sauce, humming quietly to himself. "You look happy, Marcus," she said, smiling at the transformation she'd witnessed over the past year. Marcus touched his chest, felt David's heart beating strong and steady. "I'm learning how to be," he said honestly. After Jennifer left, Marcus sat down at his desk, looked at the photo of David he kept there now. That warm smile, those kind eyes, the face of a man who'd changed everything without ever trying to. "Thank you, my friend," Marcus whispered. "Thank you for everything." Marcus Hale lived 52 years before he learned how to truly live. Took a poor man's heart to teach a rich man about wealth. Because the things that matter most can't be bought. They can only be given, received, and honored. David Chen saved 5 lives through organ donation. But he changed one life forever. Be an organ donor. You never know whose life you'll save. If this story has touched your heart, if it's reminded you of what truly matters, please subscribe to Rich Tide's channel. We're committed to bringing you stories that inspire, transform, and remind us all that true wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the lives we touch and the love we leave behind. And here's a question for you. What would you do with a second chance? If you could start over, knowing what you know now, what would you change? Who would you call? Who would you forgive? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else who needs to hear it. Because in the end, we're all given second chances every single day. The question is, what will we do with them? How would you rate this story from 0 to 10? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more heart-touching stories coming your way soon.